Hope you had fun defining your goals and dreams that we talked about in our last session. Now, those goals and dreams are new outcomes, new results, but they're the effect of different actions. The thing is this, our actions are also an effect, and the cause is our thought process. So before we start on any of the business stuff, we've got to think about mastering our mindset, because if our thoughts start from a bad place, then our results will follow. So let's dig into that. Whenever I do a seminar, I always talk about this. Our thoughts cause our actions, and our actions cause our results. So it's really important to align our thought processes to start with. So I do a bit of a social experiment, one that I've done in front of probably more than 10,000 people now. This is called the performance model. So those new goals and dreams that you've defined, they're your potential. You're not there yet. So that's a 10. I asked you to make sure that they were a 10 out of 10 in terms of excitement, but also 10 from a potential level is when you achieve those dreams. Of course, new potentials are available, but based on your current goals, 10 is the potential. Now, we know you're not there yet. So your current level of performance is less than a 10. We'll call that X. We just know it's less than 10. Now, in the context of some of those goals, just pick one, for example. Pick a goal and think about what it is that's causing you not to be at a 10. We're going to call that interference. This performance model is really lovely for establishing improved performance then, because what we do is we say, well, what are the interferences that are causing us to lower our score from a 10 to an X? And when we move those interferences out of the way, we get closer to 10. So the equation is very simple. Performance equals potential minus interference. More interferences we move out of the way, the closer we get to our potential. So it's a really powerful model. So I'd encourage you to think about those goals and think about the interferences. Maybe write them down. Now, as I say, I've done this in front of probably 10,000 plus people over the past couple of years. What happens next? I teach them this slide, and this slide is at the very crux of what we're actually trying to create here. This helps you to create that commercial profitable enterprise that can work without you when we create the environment for this. So this is what we're going to build over the next sessions. So here it is. This is the crux slide. This is the line of choice. Now, so what? Well, the point is we choose everything we do. You're choosing to watch this video. You may choose to turn it off. Your team may have chosen to turn up today. They may choose not to. Everything we do is a choice. At the lowest level is denial. When we have stuff that's happening in our lives that we're not so fond of, we might sort of brush it under the carpet and hope that it goes away. When somebody pulls us out of our denial, the next place we tend to go to is excuses. And once all the excuses are gone, there's nothing left to do but blame everybody else. Now, the thing is, we'll call this below the line. So when you think about behaviour below the line, stuff will change, stuff will happen, but it'll be happening to us. We'll be allowing it to happen. This is a really important distinction because we're probably not going to get the results we want. Above the line then, responsibility. We are the only people who are able to respond to what is happening in our life. And responsibility is a great first step, but it's not good enough yet because you see, if we want to change something, we have to be able to make a judgment on whether it's getting better or not. So we need to measure it. Hence, accountability. The word count is in accountability. So that measurement helps us to evaluate whether we are objectively improving or not, rather than it being through gut feel. Only then do we have true ownership. So this is a ladder of progression. And of course, the best view on a ladder is at the top, provided you're not scared of heights and you've got your eyes closed. Now, just imagine if everybody in your business was taking true ownership of what they were doing because they were clear enough, they were measuring their own performance, and they were all aligned. That is the end product of what I'm going to share with you through these philosophies over the next sessions. Now, that's really different, isn't it? So I told you about a social experiment. I told you about teaching people that performance model, about getting them to write down interferences. You may have done the same. Just go back and look at that interference that you either thought about or wrote down, and you make your own judgment on it right now. Do you perceive the thing that you thought of or wrote down as the number one interference to be above the line or below the line? Now, when I've run this experiment, 10,000 plus people, I always ask them the same question and then ask for a show of hands as to who's written down something that's above the line. And I can objectively tell you through measurement that probably less than 1% have actually put their hand up to admit to something above the line. That means that the other 99% are starting below the line. What do you think their chances are of achieving that potential? Well, the answer is, of course, very, very slim to maybe nothing. Hence, we've got to sort our thought processes out first. So this really powerful yet simple slide is really important to consider. Yet this too is an effect. When people choose to show up above the line or below the line, that is the effect of something. So it's important to notice where people are choosing to show up, but then it's really important to get to the root cause of why they're choosing to be there. So let's consider that. When we talk about failure, most of us have quite an unhelpful definition of failure. That being not hitting a goal. Well, if we think about the ramifications of defining failure of not hitting a goal, what will that cause us to do? Set lower quality goals perhaps, because if failure is not hitting the goal, we'll set goals that are within our current level of knowledge, in other words, our comfort zone. So they won't be very far away, they're a task list. And as a result of that, if we don't hit that goal, then we just end up back where we started. Now, why do many of us hold that definition of failure to be that? Well, it's because we were fed into a social conditioning environment at 5 years old that told us that at 16 we were going to sit in an exam room and we were either going to pass or fail. And if we failed, we were useless, on the shelf, no good to anybody. Now, in reality, that's not true, is it? Because you see, we could sit those exams, and if we failed, we had a number of choices. The choices were this: it's either important, so I'll go back and resit them, or it's not important enough, I don't need to because I've got another course of action. But until we go and sit them, we don't know whether we know enough to pass or fail, in inverted commas, fail. The only failure would be to actually go and try. If we fail, we've learned that we don't know enough yet. If we pass, we've learned that we do know enough. But other options are always available. Now, when we set up that definition of failure, then we might cause some different action. Because if our unhelpful definition of failure causes us not to go and try or set bigger goals, then a more helpful definition of failure probably will. The failure to try is caused by one of two things. No matter what you come up with as an example, it will chunk up into one or both of these things. So what causes us not to try? First of all, fear. Fear is an emotion after all. It's something that's potentially outside our comfort zone. Now, how many times have we written a story about something that was outside of our comfort zone, which we've then procrastinated around? And that's really all this causes, by the way, procrastination. And then at some point, it's either got painful enough or necessary enough that we have to do it. And we come out the other side and go, that wasn't so bad after all. So fear is an acronym. False expectations appearing real, about the story that we write based on assumption that then turns out not to be true because it wasn't so bad after all. That's one thing. The second thing is what we call the I know attitude. Now, the I know attitude, all these ideas and principles go very deep, by the way, but the I know attitude starts very simply. How many times as a coach do you think I've heard, that won't work in my business? Quite a lot, I can tell you. Now, my next question is this: how many times have you tried? Now, the answer regularly comes back as, we've never tried that, or once. Now, we've never tried that, we'll call that an assumption then, because we can't make a judgment on whether it will or won't work until we've gone and tried it. If we tried something once, well, I've very rarely met somebody who's had something that's worked first time and then consistently worked afterwards. So if it doesn't work first time, we have the ability to adapt and modify and reevaluate as long as we're measuring the outcomes. Now, the thing is with this, there's some really important, deeper thoughts around this, because the I know thing can be very obvious. Our teenagers will just say, I know. So it's very obvious. But it becomes much more subtle than that. Because how often have you found yourself in this situation where you know that somebody is only waiting for the full stop, maybe even the comma, to give you their opinion instead? Now, what does that tell you about your opinion? That it's not valid. And in actual fact, you're watching this with your opinion. I'm speaking to you with my opinion. Which one's right? Well, both of them are, of course. Now, we can either hang doggedly onto the opinion that we have and not learn anything and not try anything new, or we can choose to let that opinion in, do something with it, and maybe come out with something better than the sum of the parts. Now, whenever I stand at the front of a room, I say, look, I'm not here as the guru. I'm talking to you with my ideas that are right for me at this point in time. There are more brains looking at me than there are looking at you. So actually, even though I've seen these principles time and time and time again, I still learn something every time I talk about them. And in fact, the brains looking at me tend to teach me something about them. And that's great, because that means that I can evolve my thought process around them and share better next time. So I'm going to encourage you to notice that, first of all, everybody's opinion is valid. And therefore, to give everybody, and teach your team this, by the way, to give everybody the respect to actually listen and understand their opinion. Because what are the consequences? What are the effects if you don't? Well, people will stop offering their opinion because they think there's no point. And really, that starts to erode trust in the business. And if trust goes, fear comes in. And we'll never have an effective business with fear. So ban the I know and replace it with isn't that interesting? Because everybody's opinion is interesting. Now, if you think about it, then there's a very clear cause and effect, non-performance or performance cycle here, and it's this. Fear or I know will cause the failure to try, will cause below the line. So that below the line is the ultimate effect of either fear or I know being in existence. Our job, therefore, is to banish the I know from organisations and drive the fear out of organisations. We'll be talking more about how we do both those things as we go through these next sessions. But there's something really important in what I'm talking to you about now, which is cause and effect. We've talked about it a number of times already. In a lot of the businesses that I start working with, people are really busy dealing with the effects. I'd say running around putting plasters on things. What I need you to move your thinking to is a cause thinking instead. Stop putting plasters on, stop the cut. You see, if the cut's still happening, you're going to have to do multiple plasters. If you stop the cut, you only have to stop it once. So the move to cause thinking is really important here. And we will never get people above the line unless we start understanding the cause of them going below the line, fear or I know. A lot of that cause and effect thinking will drop into subsequent sessions. So we're going to mention that again and again and again. Now here's the thing. What I'd like you to do then is evaluate your performance against your goals. What do you perceive the interferences to be? And are they above the line or below the line? Because if they're below the line, then chances are that you're probably not going to move quickly towards your goals. Then rewrite them, cross out those below the line interferences and make them above the line. And then the next thing is this. Teach these principles to your team. Because you see, above and below the line, that's a performance standard. It's now a system. So if I were to say to you, stop making excuses or stop blaming other people without teaching you that system, you might take it very personally because you'd think I was criticizing you as a person. Whereas actually, if we've set up the systems thinking, above and below the line is now a system. It's written down. Some of my clients have it on the wall around their premises. So it's a written down clear system where there are accepted levels of performance above the line and not accepted levels of performance below the line. And when you're below the line, we're not criticizing you as a person. All we're doing is catching your behavior in a moment, saying that is not the standard of behavior that we're accepting. If you were to introduce that language in your business and teach your team that these principles are there to provide a depersonalized, objective evaluation of performance in a moment, how different might it start to become? How much easier might it start to become to catch that behavior because it's now no longer personal? So what I'd like you to do is go and teach your team these principles and embed it as part of the language of your business.